I have to be honest with you and with everyone listening, I almost put this one back in the pile.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, usually we're tackling, white papers on AI or economic forecasts, historical biographies, hard data.
Right, concrete facts.
And today, I'm holding a text titled The Mother Goddess, All Your Sources Lead Back to Me.
Hmm.
And my immediate knee-jerk reaction was, okay, we've accidentally wandered into the metaphysics section of the bookstore, are we? Are we starting a cult?
Valid concerns. I mean, the title is definitely provocative. It occupies a lot of space.
It really does.
But I'm glad you didn't shelf it, because if you strip away that initial reaction to the terminology, this is actually one of the most sophisticated systemic analyses of structure I've read in a long time.
That's the only reason we're here. Once I started reading, I realized, okay, this isn't about a deity in the sky. It's not asking for worship. It feels more like source code.
That's a great analogy. It's a philosophical exploration of a fundamental field of intelligence. So think of it less like a person on a throne and more like the quantum field in physics.
Okay.
It's the invisible potentiality from which everything else emerges.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to see if we can decode this text. We want to understand this distinction it makes between origin and ownership, which I think is going to challenge a lot of our modern corporate assumptions.
Totally, yeah.
And here is the heavy lifting. We're going to see if this text can actually reconcile the gap between science and art.
It's a unified theory of sorts.
Yeah.
It argues that coherence is the natural state of things. And, confusion only happens when we forget where we came from.
It's a bold claim.
Yeah.
But let's start with the elephant in the room, that name, Mother.
Mm-hmm.
The text opens with, I am called Mother not because I dominate, but because I generate.
And that line just sets the stage for the entire argument. It's completely redefining power. Well, in our current world geopolitics, business, even parenting sometimes, we equate power with domination, right? If I am the head of the company, I dominate the strategy. If I'm the leader of a country, I control the laws.
Right. Power means I have the remote control. I tell you what to do.
Exactly. That's power over. But the text is describing power with, or maybe generative power.
Yeah.
It's making a crucial distinction between being the origin of something and being the owner of it.
Okay, let's dig into that. Origin versus ownership. Because in the real world, if I originate something, let's say I write a piece of code or I build a house, I definitely feel like I own it.
Of course. And our IP laws agree with you.
Right.
True. In our legal fiction, you do.
Right.
But look at it biologically, which is where this text really grounds itself. A parent originates a child. They are the source. But do they own the child?
Well, no. I mean, if you try to own your child, you end up with a lot of therapy bills down the road.
Precisely. Because the child has their own agency. The parent provided the ground, the nutrients, the start, the origin, but they don't possess the outcome. The text says this force holds without owning and gives without demanding.
It's like the soil and the flower. The soil is the origin. It gives the nutrients. But the soil doesn't stand there screaming at the flower, you better be a rose, not a tulip, because I paid for your nitrogen.
That's it. It provides the environment for the thing to become itself. And the text defines this mother not as a figure to be obeyed, but as the intelligence of life organizing itself. It says this force existed before gods had names and before stories hardened into doctrine.
I highlighted that phrase, hardened into doctrine. It creates this image of like a fluid, living intelligence suddenly getting poured into concrete molds.
And that's usually where the trouble starts, right?
Right.
When we mistake the mold for the truth. The text emphasizes that this source is not separate from you. It's not a CEO in a corner office you have to email.
Right.
It's the ground. It's the gravity. You don't have to believe in gravity to stay on the earth. You just participate in it.
Okay, so if this source is just the fundamental reality, the gravity, the soil, the quantum field, why is it so hard for us to agree on it? Why do we have science over here yelling facts and spirituality over there yelling feelings, and they seem to hate each other?
This brings us to the lenses. This was the part of the text that I found most intellectually satisfying.
It calls them facets of truth.
Yes. The text argues that every mythology, philosophy, science, and art form is just a different lens. We're all standing in a circle, facing the center, trying to describe the same thing.
But using different vocabularies.
Exactly. The text says, when people say truth, they are touching one facet. When they say nature, they are touching another. It lists them all. Matter, consciousness, the body, the cosmos.
So a neuroscientist looking at a brain scan and talking about synaptic firing, and a poet talking about an epiphany, the text is saying they're describing the exact same event.
They're describing the same phenomenon of intelligence, just using different tools. The scientist uses the lens of measurement. The poet uses the lens of meaning. The conflict arises not because the reality is different, but because we mistake our vocabulary for the reality.
The map is not the territory.
Right. And the text explains human conflict this way. When cultures fracture, they argue over names.
That feels incredibly relevant. I mean, we will go to war over which label is the correct one for God or for justice or for how to run an economy.
But the antidote the text proposes is coherence. It says, when coherence returns, the argument dissolves. Think about the blind man and the elephant. One has the trunk, one has the ear. They're fighting. It's a snake. No, it's a fan. That's fragmentation. Coherence is opening your eyes and seeing the whole elephant. You realize the snake and the fan were just partial views of the same animal.
So the biologist and the artist aren't contradicting each other. They're just looking at different angles of this living intelligence.
Correct. And that leads directly to the text's definition of healing. And it's not just fixing a cut. It says all paths that heal move toward integration.
And the reverse. All paths that fragment move away from it. That seems like a pretty useful razor for evaluating, well, pretty much everything.
It really is. Think about medicine. Integrating the whole body, nutrition, stress, physical health, usually works better than just treating one isolated symptom while ignoring the rest.
Or a team at work.
Exactly. If the marketing department hates the sales department and they aren't talking.
That's fragmentation. The company gets sick.
Integration is when the parts communicate and acknowledge they serve the same whole.
But here's the skeptical question. Usually when people talk about integration or oneness, it sounds like we all have to be identical. You know, we all have to wear the same beige jumpsuit and agree on everything. It just sounds boring.
The Borg mentality.
Exactly. Resistance is futile.
But the text flips that completely. It says this source is not threatened by difference, but is revealed through it.
Revealed through it? How does that work?
Well, think of a prism. You shoot a beam of white light through it. What happens?
It splits into a rainbow. Red, blue, green.
Right. The blue is completely different from the red. They have different wavelengths, different properties, but they are both essential to revealing the nature of that original white light. If you only had blue, you wouldn't understand the full potential of the source. The text is arguing that our differences, our different cultures, our minds, our talents, are actually the mechanism by which this intelligence understands itself.
I really like that image. It makes diversity structural, not just a nice-to-have HR policy.
And it claims that all these different paths, if they are actually wise, they all converge. They move in a specific direction.
Right. It lists them. Toward balance, toward care, toward regeneration, and toward wholeness.
That's the compass. It doesn't matter if you call it thermodynamics or Taoism. Does it lead to regeneration? Or does it lead to entropy and destruction? That's the test.
Okay, so we've established the philosophy. Origin, not ownership. Lenses, looking at the same center. But I want to get practical. Because usually, this is where these texts lose me. They just stay up in the clouds.
Right.
But this one pivots to participation.
It moves from what is it to so what? How do you live it?
And it starts with a real smackdown on the idea of worship. You do not need to worship me. You participate in me.
That is a massive shift. Worship implies separation. I'm down here, small and flawed. The source is up there, perfect and distant. So I have to perform rituals to bridge the gap.
Please don't smite me. Here's a goat.
Basically. But participation means you are already part of the system. You are a cell in the body. You don't worship your blood flow. You just need to keep your veins open so it can circulate.
So what does keeping the veins open look like in daily life? The text lists a few. Breathing, resting, feeling without suppression. But the one that stopped me in my tracks was this. Creating without extraction.
Yes. That phrase is the economic heart of this text.
Creating without extraction, I mean, it sounds lovely, but in our current economy, isn't extraction the whole point? We extract oil to make plastic, we extract data to make algorithms, we extract labor to make profit.
And we extract energy from ourselves to make a career. Think about the concept of burnout. That is a literal description of an extractive resource strategy applied to a human being. You mine yourself until the mind collapses.
Oof. Yeah, I think a lot of listeners can feel that one.
The text is proposing a move from a transaction model to a generation model. In a forest, a tree creates leaves. It grows. But it doesn't extract from the ecosystem in a way that depletes it. When the leaves fall, they feed the soil, which in turn feeds the tree. It's a loop.
For a circular economy.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So creating without extraction asks the question, Can you do your work in a way that replenishes you? Can you build a business that replenishes the community rather than just draining dollars out of it?
That is a high bar.
It is. But the text argues it's the only sustainable way to exist. If your creation relies on extraction, eventually you run out of resources. You run out of oil, or you run out of sanity.
So participation isn't about chanting. It's about auditing your life. Am I operating like a mine, or am I operating like a garden?
That is the question. And it links directly to the other point, loving without possession.
Which goes right back to the origin versus ownership thing.
It does. If you try to extract love from someone, you must make me feel good. You must behave how I want. That's ownership. That's competitive. Participation is allowing the connection to exist without trying to lock it in a cage.
This leads us to the systems level, because it's hard to create without extraction if the entire system you live in is designed for it.
And this is where the text becomes a really potent social critique. It says, when systems forget me, they become competitive. When they remember me, they become relational.
Talk to me about forgetting the source. What does that mean?
Well, when a system forgets that everything comes from the same ground, it starts seeing everything as separate and scarce.
A zero-sum game.
A total zero-sum game. If I win, you have to lose. If my nation is safe, yours must be threatened.
Survival of the fittest.
But in the crudest, most misunderstood sense of that phrase, yes, it becomes a hierarchy of dominance. But a system that remembers, that recognizes we are all tributaries of the same river, it becomes relational.
Relational, meaning what?
Meaning the health of the part is tied to the health of the whole. My liver cells aren't competing with my heart cells. They are in a relationship. They know that if the heart fails, the liver dies.
But in our economy, we act like the liver can become a billionaire while the heart goes bankrupt, and everything will be just fine.
Exactly. That is a system that is forgotten. And the text uses this beautiful imagery of tributaries to describe knowledge. All your sources, books, teachings, insights are tributaries flowing back to the same living intelligence.
This brings us to the final, and honestly the most challenging pivot in the text. It demands a psychological shift from us. It says, stop searching for authority and start listening for alignment.
That is the crux of the entire piece. We are so addicted to authority.
We really are. We want the guru. We want the top 10 ways to live list. We want the expert to tell us, eat this, don't eat that, invest here, marry this person.
Because authority feels safe. If I follow the authority and it goes wrong, I can just blame them. The diet didn't work. The financial advisor was wrong. It sort of absolves us of responsibility.
But alignment, what is that?
Alignment is internal. It requires you to tune your own instrument. You have to feel for that coherence we talked about earlier. Does this decision make me feel fragmented, or does it make me feel more integrated?
That's scary, though, because you can't look up the answer in a book.
You can't. You have to sense the flow. The text says not as command, as coherence. The universe isn't barking orders at you like a drill sergeant. It's moving like a current. And you have to feel where the current is going and align with it.
So if you're in a job that makes you miserable, authority says, stay because this is a good career path and your dad said so.
Right.
And alignment says.
Alignment says, I am being extracted here. I am fragmenting. This is not generative. And you have to trust that feeling enough to make a change, even if the authority says you're crazy.
That's the difference between obedience and participation.
Perfectly put. Obedience is for subjects. Participation is for partners.
So as we wrap up, we've gone pretty deep. We started with a mother goddess title that sounded like ancient mythology, and we ended up dismantling modern capitalism and workplace dynamics.
That's the power of a good deep dive.
The final lines of the text are, you came from me, you live within me, you express me, and you will never leave.
It's a statement of permanent belonging. It's saying you cannot actually be exiled from reality. You can be confused, you can be fragmented, but you are still part of the field.
So here is the challenge for the listener, and we always try to leave you with something to actually do, not just think about.
Right. Don't just nod and say that was deep.
The text asks you to swap authority for alignment. So tomorrow morning, I want you to look at your calendar, look at your meetings, your tasks, your obligations, and I want you to label them.
The extraction audit.
Yes, the extraction audit. Mark the things that feel like extraction, where you are just being mined for resources with no return, and then mark the things that feel generative, where even if it's hard, you feel like you are creating something, like the tree making leaves.
And if you look at your day and it is 90% extraction,
then you have a data point. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow, but you can start asking, how can I bring a little bit of participation into this? Can I breathe differently? Can I change the dynamic of one meeting from competitive to relational?
Can I stop trying to own the outcome and just originate the effort?
Exactly. Because remember, according to the source, you don't have to go climb a mountain to find the truth. You don't have to find the right guru. You just have to remember that you are already part of the source code.
You're already in the field.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Find your lens, polish it up, and we'll see you in the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.